game can only I think this game can only exist as a text game. Like I don't know that you could a remake of this game that's visual would just be a totally different experience. I feel like
Yes.
it would be barely like this game at all.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a sucker for the way text just drops hints and can leave you there. Or leave them there and then it moves on. I was wondering, like, yeah, I do think the way it builds the world is really compelling for me, and I was wondering, would it be something that's better accomplished in a tabletop RPG? Because part of the strengths of tabletop RPGs versus video games is that they have infinite capacity for depth and infinite capacity for creativity. Because like I've never played Microscope. I would love to play it sometime. Um, but I think how part of how that game functions is like it's partially to create world building, and you can like talk about an event and you can kind of zoom in or out and flesh it out, or you can be like, oh, this was like this event 3,000 years ago. And so I think that would, I was thinking, oh, well, that would be a great way to not have to deal with with boundaries and being like, oh, we wrote all this content, it's a lot of work, people may never see it, which is a very real concern. But at the same time, what this does that a tabletop RPG couldn't do is, yeah, just like dropping these seeds, dropping these pearls that it weaves in. I think you can do. I mean, it's not to say you couldn't do that in a tabletop RPG, but like,
I well,
um, mm-hmm,
I think that's really interesting because I feel like you kind of can't do it in a tabletop RPG actually.
mm-hmm,
Um, because one of the things that's interesting is the boundedness that like I will never actually know what a sleeve is technically.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But at the moment that you introduce the idea of a sleeve in a tabletop RPG, I can just
mm-hmm,
ask,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
or I can like look at it. I'm like, look, I'm
Tell
gonna
me what
take.
this is.
Yeah, my character looks at the sleeve. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, like I do think it maybe is not possible
Hmm.
actually. Ironically, like given how open an RPG, a tabletop RPG is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's like I was trying to say maybe it could because you could just not talk about it, but there also is always the possibility to talk about it, to examine it, to look at it. Whereas video games, they make certain things explicitly impossible. So in that it
Yeah,
has some similarities to, yeah, writing.
I think even when you try to make the thing that's sort of interesting about tabletop role playing games is like I think even if the the person running the game, the game master or dungeon master or whatever, tries to not answer the question, they end up
Mm.
having to answer the question eventually, either from subliminal or purposeful things that the players do. So, like
Mm.
again with the sleeve thing, I might be interested in that, and I might ask directly, and the game master might be like, "I'm not going to answer that." You know, however they want, they end up doing that, whether they say that explicitly or they just give a vague answer. But then,
Mm-hmm.
like through the things that I'm choosing to do in the game,
Mm-hmm.
they will eventually have to sort of define what a sleeve is. I feel like,
Yeah.
but by like choices that I keep making, where I'm like, you know, yeah, I can't even think of anything, but like I'm going to be doing things in the game that will eventually make
Right.
that person have to make decisions about like what can a sleeve do because I keep pushing my body further or whatever.
Mm.
Like, can it live out in space? That's a thing that this game will never, like in the vacuum of space. I think that in this game, actually, that does kill you. But like, those are the kinds of things that the game can decide whether it's going to let that stuff happen, um, and players can like sort of screw up. So there's like a sense of mystery that this game is able to maintain that no game master can actually maintain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, without like full collaboration of all the players, of being like, we're gonna all agree that we're not gonna solve any of the mysteries in this game. Before I forget, actually, there's a game I have played, Microscope. And the way that we played it was kind of like, it's almost like collaborative writing is what it sort of felt like, because of like how you play that game at like the macro level, and you're not playing as like a character, so you're like all sort of like making decisions together. But another game that this Sundogs is sort of like a combination between, in some ways, Microscope and Mindjammer, which is a transhumanist role playing game that I've played. Uh, and one of the things that game instantly had problems, we instantly had problems trying to play it because of the fact that it was a tabletop role playing game. So like the I don't know, there's like an irony in the fact that you can do anything in a tabletop role playing game also can make it really difficult. So because what happened in that game was like everyone chose regular sized creatures. So like not everyone was playing as a human. Actually, nobody was playing as a human. Everyone was like, I'm a robot, or I'm like a genetically modified cat with like a full consciousness. But I chose to play as like a sentient like spaceship. And so my character like could not exist in the same spaces as that. They could be inside of me, which is how we travel. But like if we landed on a planet, they could like go do stuff, and I couldn't do any of those things. And so it was like a very weird experience in all these ways, uh, because like we didn't account for like we were trying to do anything that we wanted to do, and there's like reasons that you can't do that.
Yeah.
And this game sort of like makes all those decisions for you in advance in ways that like make it work. um, that I find kind of interesting.
That's funny. I feel like if you wanted a transhumanist game where you explored other bodies, I feel like it has to be like Animorphs. You know? Where you're like, you can like morph into a spaceship, but then you have to morph back.
Yeah, yeah, or like actually, I mean, you're kind of describing like Transformers or
Hmm.
Battle. What was it called? That mech show. Anyway, yeah, yeah, that would have worked out better. Actually, one of my favorite tabletop role playing games. It's also a terrible game. Like I like love it more than anyone in the world probably loves it, but it
Hmm.
has like so many problems. Is the Ninja Turtle role playing game, and that game is definitely transhumanist. You like play as mutant animals,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's kind of awesome. But a similar thing can happen in that game where like one person is playing as like a human sized cat person, and another person's just like a sentient elephant, and you're like, these two things can't like exist in the same locations.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well, that's interesting too because like tabletop role playing games often can be very kind of like hero's journey, like we were talking about, but in a very like physical way. It's like you have a body, you're gonna go do things, you're gonna go like enact change upon the world with your body and like with your tools. Oftentimes it's like, you got like a sword or some sort of tool or weapon that you have to be physical to use. And so things like the physicality of your character matter a lot to the fiction of the world that you're building. Whereas like in this game, like you said, it's very pared back. You're not reminded of that physicality. So like I think there's been occasionally moments where it seems like I'm walking around, and then there's moments where I'm like clearly in a spaceship, and I'm like, I've been navigating in like my pod apparently. Um, and it just doesn't really set the scene for you in that way. You just go into the encounter, and then it lets you know, yeah, yeah, your pod's going back to Mars, or um, you get scuffed up, your sleeve gets scuffed up.
Yeah, this game like conflates three things all the time, where you're like never quite sure which of the three things is happening. It's sort of like sometimes you're fully embodied and your character's like you're the camera's like in their, it's like first person perspective and they're like experiencing something directly. Then there's like the thing that you're describing where you're like almost like the camera's like behind the ship that you're in looking at stuff. Um, and then the last one is like when they're like maybe it isn't even a ship. It's just like telling you what's going on a planet. And it sort of like goes between all three of those at any point. You like don't know which of those three things is going to happen anytime you hit explore. It could be like your character is going to be talking directly to a surgeon, or like you're watching like an atmospheric thing happen on the planet, and who knows like where what your vantage point is.
Hmm. Yeah. I.
And it,
Hmm.
sorry, go ahead.
I just want like yeah. I just wonder. Can you do that in a tabletop game? Maybe. Just a very different type.
Uh, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I feel like maybe there's a way that that sort of happens on accident a lot in role-playing games where you're like asking, like, I feel like many of the times I've role-played in real life, people ask questions that like are essentially meta questions.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that ends up being like, for a moment, you're like disembodied from your character and you're like you're learning about like the location your characters are in that your character actually would not know,
Right.
if that makes sense. That um like you're learning about the layout of the room that is like beyond the knowledge of, like, if you were like map it out, your character can't actually see all the things that the game master is telling you about, that is similar maybe in some ways to what's going on sometimes in this game when it's sort of like pulled back and describing a location, where your character like maybe can't see any of this, but we're just letting you know, this is the way that this planet looks, like from far away or something.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess if you think about a game like Microscope, that is a tabletop role playing game where it's not really. Well, but that's also such a different genre that I don't know that I would say that. Like, can you play a character who also doesn't need to be embodied? I'm sure someone could make a game like that.
I wonder there. I feel like there is like transhumanist role playing, transhumanist tabletop role playing games. I think are kind of a genre, like maybe not a huge genre, but
Hmm.
there's when I was trying to find Mindjammer, more than one game popped up, like because I couldn't remember the name of it. So maybe like it feels like that might be the place. Like some of those games might be doing that,
Hmm.
because it does feel like even in Mindjammer, when you're like making your character, there's like no bounds to what your character physically is. It gives you some ideas, but then you can just also make things up. And so when you really start thinking about who a person or creature or whatever is based entirely on their mind, and it doesn't matter or what their body is, you start getting like into weird philosophical uh, role playing maybe, but also I think that might be sort of possible. Like maybe you just don't even have a body, period,
Hmm.
or you don't always have a body. I mean, ultimately, when we played Mindjammer, I was like, if my mind is in a ship, surely I can just like put it in a robot, right? Like, and then I can like walk around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know, like that. There's like opportunity maybe for that. I don't know.
Yeah. Just a side anecdote. Because I also have a psychology background, I love to imagine like the psyche of creatures different than our own if they were sentient or sapient. Um, it just reminds me of a comment one time that a friend made about his dog. He's like, yeah, she's a herding dog, so she just loves when we all stand in a row, like when everyone stands together. So I'm just thinking like um a person who primarily is a ship, be like, oh, I love going places. I love hugs. I love containing people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my parents had a herding dog, a Samoyed, and that dog was always miserable when everyone wasn't together. So I like believe that it like would like whine if someone went upstairs.
No.
Uh, Um, but yeah, I think that's actually one of the opportunities of transhumanist literature and games that this game doesn't really get into. Deus Ex also doesn't super get into it, which is another transhumanist like role playing game. It's just like what when you like divorce yourself from the physical need to be in a human body, surely that changes the way that you think as well. Um,
Hmm.
but these stories tend to be told um, as if that's not true, as if
Hmm.
your mind is essentially always going to be the same. And even like the way that you experience the world is mostly the same, and your body. I mean, sleeve is a good way of describing it, maybe in this game,
Hmm.
because it feels like clothing as opposed to a body.
Yeah.
The way that it's like shed, and the way that even that you feel about it.
Yeah.
Um, when maybe that would not be the case
It's
if
like,
you could
yeah.
upload your mind or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the word sleeve is both like it works with the structure of the game. I'm like, oh yeah, another body, try it again. And then it's also like intermittently like horrific. It's like when you take a moment to reflect, you're like, oh God. That's a body. That's something I inhabit and am undivorceable from currently.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's kind of dehumanizing
mhm,
because we currently don't live in a world in which you can divorce yourself from your body. So, like, having your
mhm,
body described as a meaningless object
mhm.
also has implications whether or not we mean it to your personhood, to your
Mhm.
mind, currently. But like that's like maybe not necessarily the case. Like, it doesn't have to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, another concept I've been having is like a person dating um like an AI consciousness. And part of what's interesting to me about that is like exploring using that to explore like how can you relate to someone who isn't bounded by physicality and the ways in which that unboundedness changes their mindset and makes them kind of think fundamentally differently than you. Like it's a way to think about one person confronting the possibility of infinite renewal. There's something here about like the themes that have been going around my brain over the past what like 3 4 years are like the impending eco death of the planet, um, renewability, sustainability, not just in the buzzword sense, but like sustaining what can be sustained, what can't, um, as well as yeah, like transhumanism, cyborgism, the body, the mind, the self. It's interesting, like imagining human beings without having a like a stressful, awkward middle school, teenage phase when everything's like calibrating? Would I still be human if I hadn't gone through a horrific middle school, high school phase?
Well, I think, I mean, that makes me think of so many different things. Like, one of the things that like dating a AI makes me think about is many of the problems that come up when you look at literature about vampires dating humans. That
Mm.
like there's power dynamics that exist from something being much older than you,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're an adult. I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's like a thing, whether something can like